And in some sense, this is what's now called as a chain abstraction, right? I think people refer to it by various protocols. There's like intents, there's, chain signatures, there's general message passing, but everything really comes down to, interoperability protocols in one shape or another. And that's really the goal, just to kind of make it simpler for the developers and users to interact with the entire ecosystem of applications and chains.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by WAGMI Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everybody, Benga here with WAGMI Ventures podcast. On today's episode, we have Sergey Gorbunov, founder of Interoperability infrastructure platform, Axelar. For anyone who is new, this is WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders and founders across crypto, Web3, and AI. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. Thank you for joining. I'm your host, Benga Al-Mushri. Let's get to it. Sergey, absolutely great to have you on the show.
Hey guys, great to be here.
Yeah, we typically want to give our listeners a bit of background on who we're talking to and how the story all began. So it'd be interesting to just start with hearing about your start in crypto. How did it all begin?
Yeah, the start in crypto began from my interest in distributed systems and cryptography to begin with during grad school. So kind of at the end of grad school, I was getting a little bit bored. I knew that my thesis was coming together nicely and I would kind of finish off. So I went on a stream to explore around, read the original kind of Bitcoin white papers, then Ethereum, kind of looked at that a little bit, understood that there's a lot of technical challenges and issues that would have to be addressed. And then we started to collaborate with Silva Micheli, who's a founder of Outgrant, and we wrote like a joint manuscript preceding it that described kind of a more efficient proof of stake systems. And it kind of went from there. Worked on the Outgrant, helped to build that out and take it to the market. And then since then, been working on the interoperability problem, which I think is super exciting and important to solve.
Great. I think it's a really timely time to be talking to you, given lots of chatter on chain abstraction and where markets are today. Let's get into Axelar and why you chose to work on interoperability, what problems you're trying to solve for, and how Axelar compares to existing solutions in the whole interoperability stack.
Yeah, when we started, actually, our pitch had a very simple slide, which is how do we enable users to interact with any chain and any application with one click from their wallets. Very simple goal. And looking at the multiple chain ecosystems, already then, like a few years ago, it was clear that we're going to need to do that for the developers and for the users to continue growing the space and benefiting and bringing more users to interacting with it. So that was a simple goal. Allow anybody to interact with any asset, any application on any chain with one click. And in some sense, this is what's now called as a chain abstraction, right? I think people refer to it by various protocols. There's like intents, there's chain signatures, there's general message passing, but everything really comes down to interoperability protocols in one shape or another. And that's really the goal, just to kind of make it simpler for the developers and users to interact with the entire ecosystem of applications and chains.
Yeah, that's amazing. As I think about that, the potential future use cases of Axelar's universal blockchain infrastructure as a platform supporting composability of any kind of application. What are your thoughts on that? And as you go the cross-chain asset transfer?
Yeah, beyond the asset transfer, right? Like what we really want to do is enable application composability, right? And then, like the simplest example to think about it, on one chain you have a wallet, right? That's an application, and then on another chain you see like a DEX or NFT launchpad or some meme coin launchpad that you want to use. That's a different application. How do you enable the wallet to interact with that end-to-end application on another chain without the user having to manually bridge, right? Like manual bridging is a painful experience and process that nobody should have to suffer, right? I think if you've done it in the past, I really hope that this is the last year that you'll have to do it. And we get to eliminate the process of users having to do bridging by having applications interact through one another using these primitives like general message passing or interoperability stacks, right? So it's like wallet going to the application or one application directly interacting with another application. So that's really kind of the future that we want to see, is that seamless kind of connectivity, seamless flows of funds or user requests in the same way as could do on a single chain where everything is like completely composable. We want to do this across multiple chains and across multiple stacks, which is very important for scaling the ecosystem.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as you talk about what that looks like today and what you're trying to solve, one of the more exciting products that you guys have recently launched is the interchange token service, which my understanding is that it's the idea is to automate the process of deploying across EVM-based networks. So basically, this new tool that maintains the fungibility and properties of any ERC token, which obviously takes out the wrapping piece and then allows them to move across any EVM compatible network. That's pretty cool. Can you share more about the development of this product or service?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The basic goal, as you described, was to make sure the users can launch their tokens across multiple chains, not just EVM. Today it's served EVM. You can get Cosmos and then a bunch of other custom chains that kind of come into life in the next few months as well. But really, you want to have a token that lives and breathes across all of these chains in a unified, simple to use and interact with way. And so kind of historically, what users and developers had to do if they want to launch their token on multiple chains is that you launch it on one chain, then you figure out some bridging protocol, then maybe you launch with that bridging protocol on another chain. It usually has like a different name. It has a different denomination. It has a different suffix or postfix. And users have to go like this manually through this bridging front end to move the token back and forth, right? So we want to eliminate all of that. We want to abstract all of that away. And so the interchain token is really, I think, the simplest way to launch a token, just not on just one chain, but on all these chains, where you get very unified experience for this token and unified liquidity, right? So it's a token that would have like the same address everywhere, has the same denomination. It's automatically composable through general message passing to be bridged back and forth by the application, so the user doesn't have to move it through a centralized front end. And you get to aggregate all of these tokens like volume on the application front end or wallet front end and really treat it as one token, even if it lives on multiple chains. So to me, I think that's one of the best user experiences and products to start going into this multi-chain journey where everything is centered around assets or tokens. And this is a core primitive that we try to simplify and kind of abstract across all these chains.
Yeah, wonderful. Hey, everybody. Quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show. I think that concept has played itself out really well in some of the PLCs that Axelar has been engaged in and involved in. Probably one of the most successful ones is your project with JPM and Apollo, and really working with them to get chains to basically talk to each other. And the success of that just allows wealth managers to purchase and rebalance their positions in tokenized assets across multiple chains, which of course was powered by the XR infrastructure. It would be great to hear your thoughts on how you leverage that success of the PFC.
Yeah. So to your point, I think it was a pretty exciting project that we did with JPM and Apollo. We actually subsequently announced that we're working with Deutsche Bank, and they're also engaging in the Project Guardian. And there's actually a subsequent report that we'll put out with Citi, JPM, Deutsche Bank, and a bunch of others that talk about institutional adoption of like RWAs and the role of interoperability in shaping up those stacks. And it's actually very critical and pivotal, right? Because a lot of these institutions, that are looking at tokenization and looking to bring more value on chain to automate all these kind of manual processes they used to do before. They have strong regulatory or privacy requirements. So as an example, they want to make sure that the data is like never revealed to certain individuals or parties, or they want to make sure that whatever the issuance of the assets is on one chain, the asset can be interacted with and has on and off ramps to like other chains, whether or not they're private and public. And so we worked with these institutions to give them these connectivity frameworks where if they launch their asset or application on one chain, they could interact with other ecosystems through the Axelar stack, make sure this portfolio rebalancing works, make sure asset on and off ramps work for them. So all of that relies on this notion of general message passing primitives and like Axelar network. And they get to see the best of both worlds, right? If it's a regulatory framework or privacy framework that they have to satisfy by launching the asset on one chain or the application, they can do that, right? They have the regulatory privacy clearances from their jurisdictions or departments, but they don't want to live in isolation. That's the whole point of the Web3 or blockchain technologies, that you get to compose with everyone else in an automated way by just writing transactions, right, or smart contracts. And so that's where we kind of come in, and that's what those are the rails that we gave them to interact with other ecosystems, so they don't end up living in isolation. So it was very exciting. I think I saw one of the conclusions that they wrote in the report that said something like over 3,000 steps were automated in a single transaction and a smart contract on chain. And that's just incredible efficiency gains, right, that you cannot get from classical ways of operating the systems.
Yeah, no, that's definitely massive. And it's interesting to hear these large financial banks and institutions directly engaging with you, with Axelar, in developing these new technologies and breaking down these silos. You mentioned the regulatory requirements and working with them, which is what I imagine is part of the challenges you have to navigate with them as you build out the solutions. I was also wondering, like, what other technical challenges did you see working with, as I think of like decentralization and interoperability, security? What challenges did you see working with them, and how are you working to resolve some of those hurdles?
You mean like on the technical side?
Yes.
Yeah, so on the technical side, like to your point, I think build is probably one of the most difficult problems to solve because it requires understanding and communication across distinct systems, right? And whenever you're talking about distinct systems, in this case, blockchains, you have to design the stack to be robust, have strong safety and liveness properties and things like that. And we have seen billions of dollars being lost in the bridging hacks in the few years prior to today. And that's very unfortunate. And that's really the consequence of like poor technology choices. If there's like multi-party computation, like it's never used in those protocols. It's always like a single actor or a few people like holding a key that becomes very centralized and prone to attacks. And so all those vulnerabilities and hacks in the space were the results of just poor technical stacks being built. So we took approach from the ground up to make sure that both the design of the network has the stronger security requirements, leveraging really large decentralized permissionless protocols, having additional safeguards at the protocol layer like quadratic voting, key rotations, and then having a really robust framework of engineering practices around it to make sure there are no bugs, right? Everything from having over 50 audits, having a multi-million-dollar bug bounties, make sure everything goes through rigorous tests and frameworks before it is shipped. And I think that approach has worked quite well to date, and we'll continue investing in the security and robustness for it. But yeah, it's not an easy problem. Fortunately, most of the protocols that you see there are still very centralized. That puts a lot of both regulatory and security risks on them. And I think we have to solve that to move forward.
Yeah. And for that project, you mostly worked with the Provenance blockchain. Is that correct? Yeah. And I know that was a POC, and largely Axelar is seeing most of its activity on EVM-based chains and continuing to onboard more EVM chains. I think earlier you mentioned Cosmos as part of that stack. As you grow Axelar, as you grow your solutions across different blockchains and ecosystems. And as you engage in more of these POC type of projects, are you looking to, or any plans to add more blockchains and ecosystems, or is that largely driven by demand?
It is driven by demand, but there's demand way outpaces what we could be doing. So there is actually a very big network upgrade that's happening kind of as we speak that puts a completely new, fully permissionless framework for integration where the bar to connect a new chain goes exponentially lower. And so that framework is being rolled out. And as a part of it, because it's permissionless, we have dozens of teams that are building connections to various ecosystems. So everything from custom chains, move languages, Solanas of the world, all of that is being integrated and all of that is being worked on. So yeah, over the next 12 months, I think we're going to have coverage across all the major ecosystems and not just EVM or kind of Cosmos. So that's going to be super, super exciting.
Yeah, no, that's exciting, and I can imagine a heavy engineering lift. And as sort of like AVM expands, Axelar is offering from bridging and message passing as you're building that fully programmable cross-chain layer. Tell us more about what that looks like as you scale.
Yeah, I think what it looks like at the end of the day is really like an open framework for connectivity. And I think if you actually take a step back and look at the history of internet, right, then you can see that interoperability and like connectivity protocols is something everybody wanted, right? And even large companies like Microsoft's and Cisco's of the world and Apple's of the world, when they realize that internet is coming to life, they try to roll out their own interoperability protocols, but none of them worked, right? And what ended up working are these open frameworks and open sets of standards and protocols like TCP/IP that allowed anybody to continue innovating around them by understanding and speaking very simple semantics to everyone else. And so it is the open protocols and standard that people can contribute and innovate around that has just exponential networking effects. And so this is really the change that we're making and the network is going through right now, and the community is to embrace the openness of the network. It is the only permissionless network out there for interoperability. So you can connect to it, you can interact with it, you can extend it, you can modify it, you can improve it without having to ask anybody for permission. Then I think that's what really we're looking for in order to have full connectivity and allow people to innovate across the stack. So it should be very exciting.
Yeah. And in answering that question of what you're looking for, I love how you sort of like take it back into the early days of the internet and sort of finding that connectivity or interconnectivity and TCP/IP coming in. And I can tell you're been very intentional and sort of been thinking about how this all comes together. I know recently you did a poll on X to sort of just understand how people are thinking of the value of interoperability. I think it ties nicely into that question of what you're looking for and what the vision and the future of Web3 interoperability looks like and what potential challenges lie ahead. Can you share more about the polling, your finding, and your own personal thoughts on how you want to take Axelar to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the broader ecosystem, then I think what's very clear that we to date have spent too much time and still continue to spend a lot of time talking about chains. So everything is about what chain to build on, what chain is better than one another, what chain has one benefit for the developers or another benefit for the developers. And then I think today that it was needed, right? We need to scale chains and have efficiency and everything else around it. But at this point, it's not a barrier for adoption. There's a lot of block space. There's a lot of good chains and technology out there. And the fact that we keep on talking about it slows us down. So I'll give you an example. If you talk to developers, the way they start their journey in Web3 is by asking what chain to build on. Okay. And then they go for weeks or even months sometimes comparing, learning different chains, understanding how to onboard, understanding how to deploy smart contracts. So great. They've done this once, they deploy their application. And then 2 months later, I can tell you most of them ask a question, what is the next chain to build on? And how do I go there? And how do I deploy my application there? And how do I manage then the application across multiple chains? And so if you look at places like Developer Report by Electric Capital, you see that more and more developers are multi-chain. And in that journey, they end up spending way too much time managing and facilitating their multi-chain deployments. And so I think the future that we want to see, and the one that we're working with, is the future that is abstracted away, where as a developer, you can build on a unified platform or a solution that gives you ability to launch on all the chains at the same time and really start capturing the value for your application without having to manage all the infrastructure and thinking about the infrastructure 70 or 80% of the time, which is not a good use of your time. And so, I ultimately think once we have this kind of a middleware or interoperability services that developers know how to use, know how to leverage, that will be a very much more attractive place for them to build and manage and deploy their applications across multiple chains than having to go and do it chain by chain. And they can really start focusing on, building the value into their application as opposed to managing the infrastructure. So to your point, I think the question I asked on X was, is it time to start moving the value in the middleware interoperability stacks or application level? And I think my personal conclusion is definitely.
What do you think? I mean, what excites you outside of interoperability in the blockchain space?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited by the actual applications that I think we're seeing and that will be built in the future. So two specific directions. One, I'm very bullish on RWAs, right? So we're talking to large asset holders, institutions that want to tokenize assets, everything from securities to digital rights, property management, title ownership, and things like that. I think it's a very exciting category. In some sense, that is the product market fit for crypto, or the biggest product market fit for crypto is automation around token and asset holdings and management. I'm also pretty excited about various kind of zero knowledge technologies that are there. Still a scaling solution, but I also have seen it applied very uniquely on problems like around identity management, right, or authentication, which I think is very exciting. So there's a work on ZK logins from Sui, right? There's some work on ZK TLS that's happened across the industry. So I really like those directions. Those are just some examples, but I think the list kind of goes on.
I can imagine. Well, thank you so much for your time today on the show, Sergey. Definitely a lot of insights there. Definitely a lot of learnings. I really appreciate you coming on, and good luck with Axelar. We're pretty sure we look forward to big and amazing things coming out of you guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the chat.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much, and have a good one.